After nearly 4 decades in power, Iran's supreme leader dead. As the second day of the joint U.S.-Israel strikes hammer targets inside Iran, the Islamic State acknowledging that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in the bombardment of his compound in Tehran. Threats of retaliation from Iran's once feared military so far proving limited at best.
This is the most activity that we have seen here in hours now. That's another interception that's, well, okay, this one is going off into the Mediterranean. There's another one that's taking place up above us. That's another interception that we're seeing here.
As the residents of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv seek shelter, American and Israeli missile defenses continue to defeat Iranian missiles and drones. Iran also targeting U.S. military installations around the region to minimal effect.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. We're doing this for the future.
But what will that future hold? To help answer that question, former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, retired Air Force General John Teichert, Democratic Congressman Ami Bera, senior member of the House Foreign Affairs and Intelligence Committees, and Congressman Ryan Zinke, a retired Navy SEAL who serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and our best in the business panel of journalists. The Hill Sunday starts right now. Hello from Washington and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. First, an update from the region as 3 American service members have been killed and 5 injured after a clash with an Iranian vessel. News Nation's international correspondent Robert Sherman joins us now from Tel Aviv. Robert, what's the latest?
Hey there, Chris. Well, this just came down moments ago. Central Command announcing the first American casualties, 3 killed, 5 seriously injured. There are others who have been injured as well who will soon be returning to active duty roles here. Up to this point, there had not been a single American casualty. And when the president first announced Operation Epic Fury, it was acknowledged that this was a possibility, that this was a risk that the United States was taking, and that U.S. service members could be hurt or killed in action. That is now reality here with this news just coming down here a moment ago. And it is a reminder that this is an active dynamic and a very lethal one. People here on the ground here in Israel know this all too well from the 12 Days War last year. There was a missile impact not far from us overnight. There was another ballistic missile impact on the ground here in Israel just this afternoon as well, which has so far, according to the death toll, claimed the lives of 9. I would emphasize that this has not been a tightly contained response that has come from Iran over the last 36 hours, as you have seen U.S. service members around the region, stationed at bases throughout the Middle East, consistently coming under fire. Some of these Gulf states have said they've had to repel hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones already in the first 36 hours here. That goes to show the relentlessness and the steadiness of these retaliations from Iran. And the message that is coming from Tehran in the wake of Supreme Leader Khamenei being killed is that nothing is changing with their resolve. Temporary leadership is in place. They anticipate a new Supreme Leader will be put into power in the next couple of days. But the resolve that Iran says that they have, their intent to continue to respond, strike, and target American troops around the region will not be dissipating in the wake of the Supreme Leader's death. Chris.
Robert Sherman, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much, and please stay safe. Okay, for a little context here, with us now is retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. He served in the top brass at the Pentagon. He also happens to be a former combat pilot who has flown nearly 40 different aircraft. That's a lot of aircraft. Okay, General, let's start with this question. If we can show the ships, the map of the U.S. assets in the region, I think it illustrates a lot about what we could do and what we've done. And you'll see eventually sort of a pincer movement, it looks like to me, right? That we have all of these forces on the Mediterranean side and then all of these forces on the Gulf side. Is it that one side is protecting and the other side is attacking? What is that?
Chris, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the president waited to start this operation until he was convinced we had the right force posture, both offensively and defensively, to achieve his objectives at the right level of risk. But I don't think there's this division of labor between the Eastern Mediterranean just being defense. I think they've flown strike sorties off of the Ford, or the Lincoln just doing offense. I think it's a combination and using those forces in the best synchronized way alongside of Israel.
Okay, 900 was what I saw. The 900 different strikes on different targets inside Iran. How, in terms of the massiveness scale of this isn't Iraq scale, but this is definitely more than what we did last year on the nuclear program. Put it in perspective.
This is, and there have been two primary target sets for all of those strikes that you just mentioned. Number one, command and control. Okay. How do you decapitate military leadership and civilian leadership so that they are fighting deaf, dumb, and blind? And then the second target set is those ballistic missiles. That is really the primary way Iran can project power. You don't go after the individual missiles, but you go after launchers or warehouses or production facilities alongside of command and control. Those have been the two primary target sets.
So drone warfare is a part of this story. I understand that the United States used drones, the United States and Israel used drones in this attack, but also I read about the United States getting control of Iranian drones and turning them back around on the people who sent them. What's the role that drones are playing in all this?
Drones have a major part in offensive operations, striking or surveilling the adversary. But then that electronic warfare spectrum, or what it goes on with electronics, primarily drives how do you manage the battle space. And that includes shutting down the adversary, but also taking control of adversaries' assets, maybe like those drones, to turn them around. But I think we talk a lot about the kinetics, what you see blowing up, but it's the electromagnetic spectrum and what's going on in that domain of warfare that is just as important.
Okay, for those service members killed and their families, and for those injured and those in harm's way today, Iran's threats feel very credible today. But in terms of the wide-ranging punishment that Iran has promised, we have not seen that materialize, nor were they able to do so against Israel before. What are the capabilities that Iran has that we haven't seen yet? Are we waiting for other shoes to drop?
I would characterize the last 30 hours in the same way that you just described, where it has not been as massive or as organized or as credible as expected. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability, like we saw tragically, to do harm to the United States or our interests. Some of those are ballistic missiles, some of those are cruise missiles, some of those are drones, some of those are maybe swarms of small boats in the Persian Gulf. I think that we need to maintain diligence so that we do not get complacent as this progresses and as we continue to strike those target sets where Iran could project power and do harm to us and our interests.
The president says basically as long as it takes, right? And that he hopes it's a few days, but if it needs to be, I think he said take the whole thing or do whatever. How long can the United States project this level of force without running ourselves thin? Can we go as long as it takes, or are there material considerations?
Part of the posture that the president decided upon so that we had it in place was sustainability. But I think actually the way Iran has responded in attacking those Gulf neighbors may allow us an easier logistical challenge going forward, because they didn't allow us to launch strikes from those countries, so that we were traveling 1,000 miles from the Eastern Mediterranean to strike. If we can start striking from our Gulf partners' locations, then that actually eases the logistical challenge going forward and makes it more sustainable.
General Teichert, thanks so much for putting in perspective for us. Okay, joining us now is Congressman Ryan Zinke, Republican from Montana. So first, Congressman, I want to just get your reaction. We have these American fatalities, those dead and those seriously wounded. Just wanted you to have a chance to weigh in on that.
Well, I know it's weighing in heavy on the president's heart. I was actually with him on the first death under 45, and that was Senior Chief Owens, SEAL killed in Yemen, and I was at that funeral with him. I know he understands what it means to go into conflict, but I can tell you the opposite side is feeling the heat. The deaths were part of the Naval Command. We have a force out there from the Navy that will destroy their Navy, all boats, and I would suggest the Iranian Navy is time to abandon ship.
Okay, so the president told Axios on Saturday, I can go long and take over the whole thing, or I can end it in 2 or 3 days and tell the Iranians, see you again in a few years if you start rebuilding. They're talking about his nuclear and their nuclear and missile programs. If it's more than 2 or 3 days, if that larger ambition is really on the table, does the president need to come to Congress for authorization?
Well, an authorization, he had 48 hours, which he's notified, and then he has 60 days to move the troops. Naval question is a different, I would say, dialogue. But how long does it take? Well, first of all, what was the demand? That no nuclear weapons, and that's control of nuclear stockpiles, because we know they have nuclear material. We know how much. So it was inspections. And he made the decision to go regime change rather than disable. That's a mission set. So now it's regime change. And we're going to go as long as it takes. I think the edge is we're hoping that the Iranian people rise. It is their country. And look, no one can argue that the Middle East wouldn't be a better place without Khomeini and his disciples of evil, meaning the 3 H's, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. Ridding them, the Middle East can actually have a golden era of prosperity too. I mean, they have good leadership a long time, and Iran made a huge mistake going after their neighbors, and now their neighbors, rightfully so, as the general mentioned, will likely give us airspace and logistics support. And I tell you, the Iranian regime of Khomeini and his disciples and that Islamic terrorist group is coming to an end, Chris.
Okay, there has been a lot of misunderstanding, and I think some of it probably willful, about what the, quote, America First foreign policy is. I think back to when Donald Trump was campaigning the first time. It wasn't that he was expressing opposition to the U.S. military killing people and breaking things, but it was about the nation building, right? That it was the after part that he didn't like. The reason for nation building, the argument for nation building in the past, though, was to try to avoid even worse replacements than what we were dealing with at the time. Isn't it possible that what comes next in Iran could be worse than what we had?
Possible, but not likely. But remember, nation building, like NATO, is everyone does their duty and does their part. So when you have the alliances that took a break from having any defense posture, especially Germany, the alliances need to be reconstructed about what the idea was, where you're better together as allies fighting common, adversaries. And whether that is, a lot of times we fight for freedom. And so freedom of markets, freedom of manipulation, freedom from corruption. But the Trump American policy, American first policy, is not ignore our allies, is that everyone should do their duty.
Okay, I'm going to put the same question to one of your Democratic colleagues right after this, but I got to ask. The Department of Homeland Security is under a partial shutdown right now because of a standoff over the rules for immigration and deportation enforcement. We can expect Iran is going to try to retaliate inside the United States if it can, and that is one of the Department of Homeland Security's jobs, is to protect the homeland. Does this add a new urgency to getting a deal to restore full funding?
Well, it should. Remember, Chris, I'm a former SEAL Team 6 commander. And I can tell you there are 100% there are sleeper cells out there. And Department of Homeland Security also does cybersecurity. They do border control. And it's the backside support that oftentimes, you don't see. It's not the critical and essential, but the backside support makes the machine run. And without the investigative, capability, without cybersecurity, without that whole network, we put ourselves at greater risk. And here's what's ironic about the whole argument: if you shut down the government, it shuts down almost everything else but ICE. So if they were worried about ICE, shutting down the government doesn't do what they want. And a continuing resolution gives ICE more money without restrictions. So if they were serious about DHS and not the politics, Chris, they would take the deal that's there is that the ICE budget is reduced and there's some modest restrictions. That's the right path, but they have the bill in front of them and you can't get it out of the Senate.
Okay, if you were from Pony, Montana, you'd know him already, but if you don't, there he is, Congressman Ryan Zinke. We thank you. Okay, let's go to Democratic Congressman Ami Bera. He represents the Sacramento area district. He's a senior member of both the Intelligence and Foreign Affairs committees. First, I want to get your reaction, Congressman, to what Congressman Zinke had to say.
Well, so on the Homeland Security funding, I'd fund everything. If we've got issues on ICE, let's separate that out there. But yeah, I do worry about attacks on our homeland right now. Iran is not Venezuela. Iran's got cyber capabilities. They probably do have sleeper cells. They've tried assassination attempts here in the United States. So again, we've got to be very vigilant right now.
Okay, it seems like the administration took some additional steps to keep Congress in the loop on this compared to the surprise attack on Venezuela. So does this satisfy the notification requirements in your mind under the understanding of war powers?
Just minimally. They did talk to the Gang of Eight, where they did not do that in Venezuela. And again, they didn't characterize the Venezuelan actions as a military action. It was a criminal action. In this case, the president has called this war. I think we're in a dangerous place right now. The president's alienated a lot of our European allies. Congress was not really notified in the sense of what the motive was. We were told one thing, this was about reducing the nuclear threat. Now it seems to be about regime change, and those are two different operations. Regime change is a long-term proposition. We've not done it very well in the Middle East, and it requires an alliance and a whole bunch of countries working together.
So if the administration had come to Congress for authorization on this, do you think they could have gotten it? Would there have been Democrats willing to support an action like this?
I think you'd get some Democrats, but I think you'd also get some Republicans opposing this action. Again, if you think about the MAGA America First movement, there clearly were a lot of the president's supporters who are very wary of another prolonged action in the Middle East. Nobody is upset about the death of the Ayatollah. The problem is what comes next. And Chris, you alluded to it. It could be worse. There's no organized opposition group. I hope our spy agencies, the CIA and others, have been inside working with various groups, supporting them. Again, there's covert ways to prop up the Iranian people. I do want a better future for the Iranian people. But again, this looks like a long-term proposition, and Congress has to be involved in this.
All right, I want to split a constitutional hair here, if you'll indulge me. I've heard Ed Markey and others describe these attacks as both illegal and unconstitutional. I definitely get the unconstitutional part of the claim, saying making war is an Article I power. But the illegal part, I don't know. Presidents since Lyndon Johnson have been using these kinds of broad powers that Congress has delegated, and courts have seemed to uphold it. Can something be unconstitutional in your mind, but still legal?
This is probably unconstitutional because, again, this is an act of war. There wasn't an imminent threat on the United States. Now, if the president were to come to us and say, look, here's what the imminent threat was on the United States and why he had to take immediate actions, we do give the president some authorities to act if U.S. assets, U.S. citizens, or our homeland is an imminent threat. That said, he does have to, Congressman Zinke alluded to, come to Congress in 48 hours, 72 hours, and explain his rationale. I would hope we get called back, today, tomorrow. Right now, I'm scheduled to go back Tuesday, and we have those briefings. I do expect a war powers resolution to come up in the House with Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, and we'll see how that vote plays out.
Are you willing to make any forecast here? Do you see Do you see what's going on as making that more or less likely to gain support?
You know, I think it's going to be a really close vote. I think we will lose some Democrats who probably are very pro-Israel, see this as a necessary action, taking out a sworn enemy in Iran. I think you'll lose some Republicans who are very concerned about, a prolonged war in the Middle East. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweets yesterday, and I don't think she's alone in her concern.
Okay, Congressman, we appreciate you. And America, if you were from Gold River, California, you'd know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Ami Bera. We thank you. Okay, lucky for us, we've got News Nation's senior congressional correspondent, Joe Khalil, is with us today. Okay, we heard some spin. We've no offense to spinning. It's what this town runs on. But
part of the game.
We've heard the posturing here. What is the reality of what Congress is going to do here, if anything?
So probably Wednesday, I'm told, we're going to see this war powers vote. That could change. Is that going to limit what President Trump does? Or in other words, is the president waiting for Congress to act before he makes his next move? No. I don't think anyone's under any delusion that's happening. But I think what's important about this is, number one, the fact that now you have service members who've been killed. This is no longer theoretical. This is real. So when Congress, particularly Democrats, will argue it's our job to vote whether or not to put people in harm's way, again, now you've actually got a body count that could potentially go up. I think, when you think back, there are a lot of comparisons to the Iraq War. In 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, people were still getting grief for their votes in 2003.
Yeah.
So
ask Hillary Clinton.
Exactly, yeah, and she wasn't the only one. And so I think what you're going to see is, at the very least, this is meaningful in that everybody, when that vote happens, is going to be on the record. And who knows what this conflict might become. Maybe we're sitting here in 2 weeks and there's no more, kinetic action. But if this is a prolonged thing, this is going to matter. It's not just symbolic, but I think it will be meaningful whether or not people, support or not.
Okay, and one thing we know that Congress has power over is appropriating funds. But Congress doesn't like to use that power because it doesn't want to be seen as withholding resources from the troops in the field. I understand your point about how the politics play out, and there are a lot of Democrats who are going to be wrestling with the question of, do I want to be voting against, and all of that stuff. From appropriations or an oversight perspective, do you see anything happening there?
I think if there were votes that were taken in that way, I think you're right, it would be a tough vote. But I think you would see there would certainly be some Democrats that would support funding for the Pentagon for the exact reason that you just laid out. They may not be all in for whatever the administration does next, but it is a really tough vote for that sort of middle ground moderate Democrat to vote against Pentagon funding, especially at a time when you're going to hear the argument that if Americans, service members, are in harm's way, they're going to need this funding. This is not the time to be withholding. So you can see that already starting to happen.
Every member of Congress has to talk to Joe Khalil, so that's why you have to listen, because the guy knows. Joe, we really appreciate you. We're going to have much more on this on the other side. Stick around. When it comes to public support for the U.S.-led effort to remove the Iranian regime, motives will matter. And while President Trump laid out a litany of reasons to escalate this war, there is one issue that seems to connect best with voters: Iran's long effort to obtain a nuclear weapon. All right, this is from a February poll from the National Opinion Research Center, and you can see that a big plurality, that 48% up there, was extremely concerned about Iran's nuclear ambitions. Fewer than 1 in 5 were blasé about it, so that's a big deal. But the next question will be what Americans are willing to sacrifice to eliminate the threat. And if more than a couple of days of airstrikes are required, will the public want to stay the course? Okay, here you see that voters have, this is from the same poll, have little to no trust in the president to wisely use force. This poll, by the way, was taken after the Venezuela raid and as the president was moving our country to a war footing with Iran. And nor is this just a partisan question. Yes, Democrats overwhelmingly don't trust the president, but a large majority, 60% of independents, and a significant minority of Republicans had their suspicions. Remember in this what then private citizen Donald Trump said about then President Barack Obama back in 2012. Remember this? Now that Obama's poll numbers are in a tailspin, watch for him to launch a strike in Libya or Iran. He is desperate. Those are the same kinds of suspicions that now President Trump, struggling in his second midterm cycle, will face from Democrats and a lot of independents. And that's why it's essential for him to try to project dignity and purpose to a skeptical nation.
The Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission.
A sadly prescient prediction from the president there. So with us now is our best in the business panel of journalists, Domenico Montanaro. He's the senior political editor and correspondent for NPR. Michelle Price, say hello to Michelle Price. She's the White House reporter for the Associated Press. And our old friend, John Tamny, he is editor for Real Clear Markets. Domenico, we begin there. The loss of any U.S. service members in any endeavor is tough to take. And I think it sort of reframes the discussion around this sort of instantly because it changes the gravity.
Well, and that's the thing is that Americans have been skeptical of involvement overseas for a couple decades now. I mean, once the Iraq War went into civil war and went into sort of a tailspin, you saw George W. Bush's poll numbers collapse. And even Trump himself, he wouldn't be president probably without his commentary on the Iraq War. And, you know, he's very wary of getting involved in nation building and being involved in especially a Mideast country for an extended period of time. I find it interesting, though, that there doesn't appear to be a plan for what's next for the regime that you want put in place, either in Venezuela or in Iran. And eventually, I think a lot of critics feel like that can catch up to you.
Okay, Michelle, how is the White House doing messaging here, right? The sober-sided, more serious, less whatever, but it's not exactly Bush or Obama announcing major combat operations kind of situation. How is that going?
I mean, we haven't heard a lot. We've heard that 8-minute video from the president yesterday. But he hasn't really made a clear case to the American people yet about why this was necessary. There's some kind of varied reasons in that video. And a lot of what he seems to be talking about is regime change, which is something that we heard the administration of the last year say that they actually weren't interested in. So kind of laying out that case of what was so urgent, why this needed to happen now. We have not seen the administration make that case yet. And that's something today and the following days that we'll be looking to see if the White House actually does make that case and the president himself make that case.
John, I may be overcooking it, so you got to pull me back if I am. This feels like the reversal of decades of U.S. foreign policy, right? Because the old way was the Vietnam lesson and what we saw in the first Gulf War and what we saw in the Iraq War. You break it, you bought it, right? That if you force regime change or do something else, that the United States is then obligated and you'll be in a quagmire, and that affected the way the U.S. conducted foreign policy and used military power abroad. The Trump doctrine seems to be, we can break it, and then we have bought nothing. And as the president basically said in his interview with Axios, you can put a new government in, and if we don't like that, we'll come back and kill you later. Am I reading that this is as dramatic a shift in U.S. foreign policy as it is?
I think it's quite something, especially coming from an administration. As Dominic points out, one of the reasons Trump is in office is growing skepticism within the electorate about war making. And so with this, hopefully this isn't true, but I think we're going to be faced once again with, is there a Thomas Jefferson waiting in the wings to replace the guy that we all think is a bad guy? And I think it's highly questionable. We haven't had that yet. Why we think it's going to happen in Iran is a good question.
Domenico, this is, and I'm obviously dating myself, but this is, I'm feeling the Rumsfeld versus Condoleezza Rice argument from so long ago about basically the forward strategy of freedom, do we need to build something in its place, or is it enough to say we took out this regime and we can take out the next one?
There's certainly a lot of unknown unknowns here.
There you go. Thank you for coming with me on my
myself
journey
as
to
well.
the aughts.
I think it's a huge change in American foreign policy. I think from what we saw post-World War II through 2017 was something that was fairly consistent across both political parties, where you had some obvious differences on how to conduct foreign policy, but something that was relatively stable. Trump came in, had a very different point of view. He has a very different point of view on how to conduct himself, not just on a foreign policy standpoint, but domestically. And it's very much this tough guy, sort of machismo attitude. And I thought it was really interesting because I saw Brian Mast on another cable channel. He's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, or the House Armed Services Committee, rather. And he said that he was asked whether or not the U.S. has an obligation to Iran to do anything to help regime change. And he said, we don't owe them anything. He said, we went in and did this, and, if they have a regime we disagree with, then, we'll take them out too.
Michelle, the president is getting to like this, it seems like, right? The success in Venezuela, now we don't know what the long term will be in Venezuela, but using American force in a way that we did not see in the first administration. I noted, and again, pull me back here if I'm taking it too far, I have not seen Vice President J.D. Vance in these pictures for this or for Venezuela. I have seen Marco Rubio front and center in all of this. Should we believe that there is some sort of schism or split in this administration about how muscular U.S. foreign policy ought to be?
Well, it's curious because there was a picture that the White House put out yesterday of the vice president in the Situation Room watching the operation. He was there with the Treasury Secretary and the Energy Secretary. It is notable that this time he was back in Washington. In Venezuela, he was in Florida, at least meeting with the president for part of the time. We actually haven't heard from the vice president in the last day. We have asked his office, does he have a comment on this? Does he support this operation? And we have not heard that. The vice president has talked about Venezuela. He said he's been supportive of it. What's interesting about this president, one of the most true things I think somebody has said is Donald Trump doesn't like war, but he seems to enjoy the acts of war, the strength that is demonstrated in a strike, the military power. But we are reaching a point where this is turning into a war.
John, what's the effect on markets? We don't know, but what do you foresee?
It can't be stressed enough that we could be bereft of oil 100% and embargoed and at war with every oil-producing nation, but we would still consume the oil as though it had bubbled up in West Texas. If you're producing, you are importing. The biggest driver of the oil price is the value of the U.S. dollar. No one talks about it. War has historically been very bad for the dollar, and it could paradoxically lead to much higher oil prices.
That's why we have you around. This is very, very helpful. Okay, we're going to be right back. On Friday, the president said he was barring the federal government from working with the artificial intelligence company Anthropic. This over Anthropic's clash with the Pentagon over guardrails on the government's use of AI in autonomous weapons and mass domestic surveillance. Within hours, a deal had been struck with Anthropic's AI competitor OpenAI. But we're learning now that Anthropic's AI tool was indeed used in the attack on Iran after the president had announced the ban. What to make of it all? Good thing our panel is here. John, we take it to you. What do we make of what's gone on here between Pete Hegseth and OpenAI and all of this stuff?
On November 1st, 2022, no one had heard of AI. By the end of the month, everyone had heard of it and was talking about it. This is what the private sector does. It reinvents the future in ways we could never have imagined. How horrifying, particularly from a Republican administration, that they are so actively intervening and meddling with what these innovators are doing, and what does that signal about the future if they are going to get in the way of what can't be predicted?
Okay, for this administration, they have been real pro-tech and pro-tech bro and pro-AI and pro-pro-pro. This is the first Domenico schism that we've seen. Is that right?
Well, I think the bigger thing here is that you have Anthropic trying to stand up for what it sees as its ethics and guardrails against using its tools in war. And then you have OpenAI saying, hey, we'll take some of that Pentagon money, right, and coming in. And I think that that's going to be the real, split in the future, is these companies want to be able to say, this is how we want our tools used, but are you going to turn down billions of dollars from the government? It seems like that's the kind of carrot that is hard to turn down.
Michelle, is this a negotiation? Is this still ongoing, do you figure?
Well, there's a lawsuit. That's kind of where this is going. But what's interesting about the OpenAI deal is that they have taken the same terms. So it almost seems like the fact that Anthropic was so public about their concerns seems to be a factor here in this dispute.
But could it be here, John, quickly, that this is trying to influence the market by rewarding some and punishing others to try to pick winners and losers?
Which is dangerous because government distorts when it spends money differently than we do in the private sector. How does it distort OpenAI and in Anthropic in the past by them vying for government money?
Okay. Guys, thank you so much. Thanks for your time on a hectic, newsy Sunday. We appreciate you. We're going to be right back with a special interview, so stick around. Welcome back. Just before the show and just before the news that those 3 American service members were killed in action, we had the opportunity to speak with Ambassador Wendy Sherman. Here's that conversation. With us now is Ambassador Wendy Sherman. She is the former Deputy Secretary of State during the Biden administration. She was also one of the lead negotiators of the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Ambassador, thanks so much for making time for us. The Iranian regime says it will weather the loss of its supreme leader. Based on what you see, how realistic is that claim?
Very good to be with you this morning, Chris. I think it is quite real that Iran's regime will sadly survive. They have many layers. They're quite an institutionalized regime. The supreme leader had a succession plan in place. The BBC, in fact, this morning is saying that his son is going to succeed him. His son is very, very strict fundamentalist. That would not bode well for what everyone would hope to see in a changed Iran. I think that people had hoped that perhaps Larijani, head of the Supreme National Security Council, might really lead, and perhaps he will from behind the scenes. But I think we have a long way to go to know what the future of Iran is going to look like. When one takes the action that President Trump did, the beginning may be terrific, but no one knows how it will end. We saw that in Iraq when we all were completely amazed at the shock and awe of the first couple of days. And then, as we all know, Iraq turned into a nightmare for a very long time before it found its feet. So no one, I think, is really sorry that the supreme leader is gone. He was an odious leader, very repressive, but that regime may continue yet in another form.
So when we think about what could come next from Iran's government, many people point to the military and say that this could be a junta, that the sort of theocratic regime, the mullahs, could be thrown over by the military, which remains strong. What do you, when we look at the division of power in Iran, which is a big country, 90 million people or something, with some ethnic divisions and all of this stuff, where are the centers of power that you see?
Well, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is without a doubt a very strong power center. They own a lot of the economy. In fact, they haven't minded in some ways the sanctions because they have owned the black market, so to speak. But I still believe that if, in fact, the regime that the supreme leader had put in place in case he was killed comes forward, that we will see pretty much a similar approach. This would be really terrible for the people of Iran. We all know that thousands of protesters were killed by this oppressive, repressive, really dictatorship, theocratic dictatorship, as you noted. So I think it remains to be seen. And Chris, I don't know if we really are on the edge of a much wider war. To see protesters attack the consulate in Pakistan, the U.S. consulate, to see splits between Shia and Sunni Muslims growing in the region, seeing other Arab states getting engaged, I think the days ahead are going to be quite fraught.
Okay, the principal rationale offered by the administration was the imminent threat of Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. So does that mean that the operations against Iran's nuclear program last year were less effective than we were told, or that Iran was better at reconstituting those programs than we had expected? How should we read that?
I think you've asked a really fundamental question. The President of the United States said that the strikes in June of 2025 obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. Obviously, they didn't completely obliterate them. They were driven underground. They were covered in rubble and debris. I have no doubt that Iran would try to reconstitute its nuclear program, may have begun to already do that, certainly was trying to clear away the debris to get to what we all expect, that the highly enriched uranium stockpile was underground underneath that debris somewhere. So I have no doubt they were going to try to reconstitute, but they were a long way away from having the fissile material they needed for a nuclear weapon and then weaponizing that and really actually creating a nuclear weapon. And the intelligence community has said they were some long ways away from having an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States. So I do think there's a question. Was there an imminent threat to the United States? There is no doubt that Iran was a threat. They're the strongest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. But were they an imminent threat that meant the United States of America would use billions of dollars and our military personnel, our people, our treasure, to in fact try to create regime change, which quite frankly, we've never been very good at?
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, we thank you for making time for us on this busy day. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Chris.
And we did appreciate her help and the help of all of our guests and correspondents, reporters around the world today. This has been quite a story to cover. And again, to reiterate that news of 3 American service members killed in the conflict with Iran, and several others injured. We will be keeping track of that story here at News Nation. We encourage you to stay tuned, to follow us on your social media, to watch us, and to check us online. We will continue to have these stories and all of the latest for you. Okay, coming up for you, it is a black and white issue in your almanac. That's next. This is your almanac for today, Sunday, March 1st, 2026. On this day in 1810, composer and pianist Frédéric Chopin was born in Poland. The son of amateur musician, Chopin was a wonderkind. By 15, he was already performing for Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Chopin would give only 30 public performances in his career, but still changed the world of music profoundly through his writing and stylistic advances. His etudes, French for studies, were deceivingly simple, short pieces, perfect for teaching piano. And the world was about to get a lot more piano teachers. When Chopin started playing, pianos were instruments for aristocrats. But the Industrial Revolution and mass production changed all that. In 1800, worldwide piano production was estimated at just 2,000 instruments. By the turn of the next century, it was 500,000 a year. In the city of New York alone, it was estimated at the time that 1 in 6 New Yorkers were reportedly working in some kind of piano-related job. And of those millions of pianos produced in the 20th century, nearly everyone would have known the notes of Chopin. But as music went digital and piano lessons fell out of favor, Americans seemed to lose their connection to that preeminent Pole. For 55 years, the United States was shut out of the International Chopin Piano Competition held annually in Warsaw, until last year, that is, when 27-year-old Eric Liu brought the prize home, stunning judges with his performance of Polonaise Fantasy Opus 61. So whatever your fortes are, we hope you compose a great week for yourself. Until next time.